This is Lean Into Lonely. My name is Kate Milliken, and in 2006, I was diagnosed with MS. I was 35, single, and I couldn't walk, and I'll never forget how lonely I felt as I came to terms with my new normal. Upon further reflection, I realized my whole life had been dotted with lonely moments. I was lonely when my brother got invited to a party and I didn't. I was lonely when I didn't get into my first choice college. I was really lonely when I got ditched at the altar 2 months before my wedding. And as a startup entrepreneur, now working to eliminate the problem of loneliness in chronic illness, I realized I'm still lonely. Instead of hiding from these moments, I'm taking the opposite approach. And this podcast blows open moments like these from people like you. This is Lean Into Lonely. I first met Vickey Kuperman in 2006 when I had launched my production company that produced mini documentaries for private clients. And Vickey was an editor by trade, and she was my first kind of perma freelancer. So she worked at least 40 hours a week for me, and she would come to my home office, and she did some incredible work kind of making these narratives, which are actually really hard to do. And at the time, Vickey was single in her 20s and I was single in my 30s. And we had a lot of laughs talking about the ways we were spending our non-office hours, which certainly cemented our friendship, I think. And that year that Vickey was working for me, she was also deciding that she was going to try her hand in comedy. And I was with her and part of her life when she launched that part of her dream, and she has made enormous strides since. We have been in touch for sporadically over the years, and recently I heard about a very intense moment that I would certainly quantify as lonely that has to do with anxiety, and I'm looking forward to hearing more. Vickey Kuperman, hi.
Hi.
I'm super happy to have you on Lean Into Lonely. When I started this show and I made a master list of kind of my debut episodes, your name came to mind for so many reasons. Welcome.
Risk.
Right. You took a lot of risks when we were younger. There's no doubt about it. And I'm glad you made it home alive.
Me too. Oh my God, every night.
Was it worth it?
I'm just talking about my dating in my 20s. What are you talking about?
That's exactly what I was talking about. No doubt in my mind. One of the first things that when I thought about you and putting you on this list of people to interview, I've always had such a deep curiosity about comedy. And one of the things that was so cool when we were together is actually watching you step onto that stage for the first couple times.
You were there the first time.
I was watching you shitting bricks. And you want to tell the story of how I came to your show? Because I love you so much.
You came toothless.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how you lost your tooth.
I had literally bitten into a piece of corn and lost my tooth at a very fancy brunch. Actually, Gwyneth Paltrow's brother was there.
That's a very typical Kate Milliken story.
But I knew it was your first show, and it was in Times Square, and you got a group of people there. So talk a little bit about what it's like to be a comedian now that you are over a decade doing this art, how one progresses, and does it ever get less difficult?
Yes, it does get less difficult. I remember that first day very well. I was supposed to be at the club at like 1 because this was a graduation show at Caroline's on Broadway, and they have to have they're real night shows, so they do the graduation shows at like 2 and 4 or something like that. Mine was at 4, but I came to support my other classmates who were 2.
You were graduating from a comedy class.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that I'd taken for 6 weeks. So I really hadn't performed much when I did it. I think I'd done 6 classes, and then like the last 2 weeks I did a lot of open mics, which is awful, but it lets you stand on stage and say the things out loud and see how they sound. But other than that, there's not really that much value to open mics. So that morning I went swimming, and while I was doing laps, I was like, all right, who do I have to email to cancel the show? I'm not doing it. And I have to email my friends. So who's coming? Because I have to tell them not to come. I'm not doing it. It was I was so nervous. I
Well,
can't do this.
describe also the comedy, the type of comedy that you were stepping into.
I don't remember. I guess there was
Well,
a lot of sex jokes.
a lot of sex, and also that you are Russian.
Oh yeah, but I didn't do much about that at first.
You talked a lot about your father, actually.
Not the first time.
Oh, I remember.
The first time was like, really? You remember father?
I do, but I may be wrong. Maybe all your amazing conversations.
The first time I had like my first joke was like they were just so bad. They were like
Tell one.
actually I found my first set list a while ago. Maybe I could find it. Hold on. It was so bad. There are like no punchlines. There's no punchlines. I did racial stuff. I did a lot of sex stuff. A lot of dick jokes.
Can you
and
remember
I
one
remember
joke for our loving audience?
one joke was like I mean, it's so bad now. I can't even. Okay. I met an Indian guy while I was traveling the world. Indian men are really bad in bed. We spent 3 days in bed together. We never had sex, but my belly button hurt for days. It's really bad. I'm sorry. I don't mean to say anything bad about Indian guys. It was just that kind of stuff, and that's how I delivered it too. I had like no delivery. I'd be like, my belly button hurt for days, and then I'd stand there smiling or looking at the floor. It was awful. I mean, honestly, even though I was bad, a graduation show you really don't do bad at because your friends are there to support you and everyone's so nervous. They're just like, oh my God, it's Vickey on stage. Like, no one cares. So it was a rush. I felt the rush of performing, and it was crazy. It was like, I love to surf even though I'm terrible at it, and I just haven't been able to get good because I just can't ever stay in one place long enough to learn how to surf because I have to come back to New York and work. But it's kind of like when you actually catch a wave and you stand on it, like there's not much work because the wave does a lot of work. The work is getting on top of that wave. So basically that's how comedy is. When you actually kill with a joke and the audience laughs really hard, you feel like you're riding a wave and you just stand there and it's nice.
So
there's no work.
In the trajectory of you being a comedian and having done it for as long as you have, is there now like a sense of momentum and belonging, or does it always continue to be piecemeal and based on joke by joke?
Momentum on stage or like in the like the life?
In general, I think.
There are moments when you have momentum. A good set is when you have momentum. You will hear a lot of comedians say like, they were okay, they laughed, but like they'd be like, like there was no momentum. So some audiences laugh, but then they shut up right away and wait for. They're like, show me what else you have. Like, so they're like, versus like a constant sort of like happy audience, like. Like almost like some audiences, you're like, did everyone take Molly before the show? They're just so happy, like laughing throughout, giggling all the time. And then other audiences, no momentum. So it's literally a crapshoot every night you go out. It's not like you build momentum. I mean, as you get better, and if you're very funny, you do well more than you don't.
Yeah.
But like my friend, for example, who is a huge John Oliver fan, who is huge right now, huge, famous, successful, especially with like liberals, really beloved comedian and host and political, truth sayer, I guess. She saw him like in Denver and she's like, it was so uncomfortable. He bombed so hard and I didn't really get it because it was a liberal audience. I honestly think sometimes it's the chemistry.
Wow.
And it's just comedy, it's connection. And sometimes there isn't a connection and it's nobody's fault. Like I used to blame myself every time I bombed, and that was really not healthy because It's not really my fault. It's just like a connection, and sometimes the connection isn't there and there's nothing you can do about it. It's like saying someone's bad in bed. Well, no, maybe you just didn't have the chemistry together.
You still feeling bad about that Indian man?
I feel a little bit about the Indian guy. Just a little bit. I have so many. I still have racial jokes, but it's funny. I always think like I had more racial jokes in my first album, and my second album was like not about that at all. And I'm like, if I ever, maybe I'll be famous enough one day that people will dig up my first album and then, like, you know, try to shame me for my racial jokes. That would be great. I would love to be that famous.
Right, right. You got to own everything that happens. It's part of the journey. There's no doubt about it.
That's right.
So
yeah, but I don't think there's any jokes off limits. I mean, I don't do jokes about certain things because I just will never find them funny. But I would never tell a comedian that a joke's off limits. If it does well, I mean, if it's not funny, then they just, you know, they deserve to bomb.
Yeah. So I'm so glad that, you know, over the years that you and me continued to check in and meet up and talk. And I do remember I had ended up going to Arizona because I finally got married. Thank God. And spent a couple years there.
Finally. Oh my God. Only you would say finally, even though you were in your 30s.
I know. Well, 38. It was pretty ripe.
You were young.
Look, the fact is, I think that when you're dating and you sincerely want a family, and a lot of people have it around you, it does start feeling lonely.
Yes.
You got so much love to give, right?
I remember that being an issue towards the end for you.
Yeah.
That you went away like to some island for a few days and everyone was there with kids. And I felt so bad because I was like, oh my God, Kate, you have such a great life. Don't worry about it. It'll happen. And it did.
Yeah. Right. And it actually happened when I believed that my life could be okay without it, which is what they always say. And it's true.
Yeah.
So while I was in Arizona, I would say our correspondence got more and more sporadic. And I do remember us finally connecting a few years ago and you talking about what had happened to you, I think starting in a subway car. And I kind of wanted to talk about that. So talk to me.
So I, it had been building, anxiety had been building for various reasons in my life. Job was, you know, I've been doing comedy 10 years, but I'm still having to work during the day because that's comedy. Like you do have to have a side hustle, or comedy's your side hustle until it's not, if you're lucky. And so it was building anyway, my anxiety and certain issues I've had for a long time.
And what year was this, Vickey?
What?
What year was this?
2012.
Okay.
And I took stupidly, I ate a small pot cookie. And, which, by the way, I'm okay, like I can vape and I can smoke pot, but I have learned now twice that I cannot ingest marijuana. It is very dangerous for me. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I had a bad trip, and it happened on the L train, going to a show. I can't even believe I ate a pot cookie before performing. I don't even drink after shows. I don't know what I was thinking. I really don't know what I was thinking. I don't even have a drink after like a weekend of shows. I just don't. I really don't drink that much at all. I mean, my friends like think I don't drink at all. I mean, I'll drink like a glass of wine once a month, but really I don't drink.
Yeah, you have never struck me as a drinker.
No, and like I'll vape sometimes.
Yep.
But really, I don't have a drug problem, I promise. So I don't know what I was thinking to eat a pot cookie before a show. This is like really something I would never do, but I did. And anyway, it was a bad trip, and I had a terrible trip, and it was on the L train, and I had to run out, and I felt like I was running underwater in a dream, slow motion, and then I ended up being put in an ambulance, and I was so paranoid because I thought I'd be arrested because I was so paranoid on the pot that they kept asking me if I'd done drugs. And at this point, I looked like a meth head because I was making all sorts of weird gestures with my hands, and my eyes were probably
Vickey, who
dilated.
found you enough to say, I think you need an ambulance? Like, what interaction occurred then?
I collapsed on the top of the stairs of the subway at 14th Street and 8th Avenue, and this couple from out of town was like, "Are you okay?" And I think I was like rocking back and forth, I'm not okay. Oh, I'm so scared. I want to go home. And there happened to be 2 ambulances right there for something else. So I was put in an ambulance. And
only in New York. You just happened to run.
Only in New York. Yeah. There's just ambulances waiting for you on 14th Street on a Saturday night. It's the service the city provides. And the EMT guy was so nice, but he kept saying, "Are you sure you didn't take drugs?" And I was so paranoid. I didn't know the rules. Now, like, people laugh. They're like, "You can't get arrested for having drugs in your system. It's only if you have them on you," which is good to know. If you ever have drugs on you, just take them. I'm just kidding. So the guy, basically, I ended up like I knew my friend Kendra had a show near there, and so I had him call her, and he was like, "Hi, this is Jose with the New York EMT. I'm with your friend Vicky. She's okay, but we're taking her to Beth Israel." And she's like, "What the fuck?" She got this message, got in a cab. I was in the hospital completely having a nervous breakdown, and the doctor came in, and I was so paranoid. I like pulled the curtain, and I was like, "Can I tell you a secret?" She's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "I ingested marijuana tonight." And she laughed, and she goes, "Thank you for telling me, because we would have wasted a lot of time and money on tests. Well, we're just going to put you on a saline IV. I really appreciate you telling me." I'm like, "Please don't put it on my discharge papers. I could lose my job." Still paranoid that somehow my employer would see, whatever.
Yeah.
By the time Kendra got there, I wasn't having a bad trip at all. I was just high. So she shows up, and I'm like, "Hey!" She's like, "Are you kidding me?" And I have the video. Kate, I will send you the video of me having a laughing fit. Kendra videotaped it in the hospital once the saline had kicked in. It's really quite amazing. It will make your day.
So even
like a
though
laughing fit.
this trajectory of drugs ended up kind of coming to a nice.
All right, you say trajectory of drugs. I wasn't a drug addict.
The trajectory of your one episode of Pop Cookie. That moment of anxiety had a massive effect on your life.
Massive, yeah. Awful. So for the next 2 years, I grappled with dissociative disorder as sparked by this moment. Dissociative disorder is part of panic disorder, or it can be. So it was basically I was having panic attacks, and they started getting. At first they were infrequent. I had one 4 months later, and I had to run out of a restaurant, and then literally run out. I thought I was going to pass out, and then I started having
in that moment. Give me the build up.
Everything starts suddenly appearing in slow motion. I feel like I'm in a fishbowl. I can't, the sound really overwhelms me. So if I'm in a loud place, that's just like the enemy for my type of panic and dissociative disorder, the enemy. Like I couldn't go to restaurants, loud places, literally, kind of like when they portray an autistic person who has sensory overload and needs earphones. That's how that's like a very accurate portrayal of how I felt. I'm talking highly, highly autistic when they need headphones because it's sensory. And so
first they were
that
infrequent.
started building.
Yeah.
They were infrequent at first, but I would say within a year, I kept saying, "I feel weird. I feel drunk. I feel drunk." That's how I feel drunk. I feel like not connected. I feel like I'm walking through a dream. I don't know what's happening. And nobody really understood what I was going through. And then about a year and a half later, it like snapped. I actually moved, and moving is like considered top 5 stressful things. And I think that really sparked the gates opening to insane, full-on panic disorder.
So how'd you deal with it?
So, I dealt with it for the first few weeks by literally lying in a fetal position, not being able to leave the house. Like seriously, my building is on top of a grocery store, and I would go to the grocery store and I'd be scared. I mean, this is, as you know, this is really not me.
Yeah.
I really just didn't recognize it. And that's the weirdest part. It's like when you got MS and you're like the most active person I know. It's like when something happens to you that you don't recognize yourself with. Yeah. I mean, I was a stand-up comedian who's really social and traveled the world, and now I couldn't go to a grocery store. It just made no sense. I was like scared of the lamp in my house. It just was very weird. It was hard to explain, and luckily I didn't have to, or sadly, because everyone I told either had it or knew someone who did, or struggled with anxiety, or had just gone to the hospital because they thought they were dying and it was anxiety. So it opened up. It was really eye-opening. I mean, I'm glad it happened to me because it let me really prioritize things. And I don't always believe everything for a reason, but I do believe this was, in hindsight, something that needed to happen. So
what were some tangible things that came out of it in terms of the choices that you made and the way that you lived your life?
First of all, I I know what my limits are now so well, and I'm like so confident when I can or can't do or partake in something, and it just let me say no easier. Uh, Not just because of anxiety, but in general, like, can I really take this on? No, it would be smart not to. Whereas before, I just was like, yeah, 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 put on my plate, put on my plate, put on my plate.
You know
Number
what's
two,
been, before you go into number two, what's been really interesting that I've learned with being part of My Counterpane Mental Health is the enormous importance of self-care. So
yeah,
people who are
self-care.
recovered from moments of bipolar or affective disorder or borderline, they all talk about if they put themselves first in terms of their sleep
Yeah,
and lack of stress, that
yeah,
they can maintain good health.
yes. Yep. Um, there were a few other things, absolutely, but also number two is that just no shame in any mental or emotional stuff. So I'd always been like a big proponent of being honest about therapy or depression or whatever you have, but this really like put me over the edge to be like I'll tell anyone. I mean, I'll tell anyone. I'll be like, "Oh, I have that. Oh, I have panic disorder." There's no shame in it. It doesn't mean weakness. Basically, I just stopped attributing anxiety with weakness.
Yeah.
And number three, um, as you know, I basically that I hit rock bottom like in the early part of 2014. And then me being me, I was like, all right, by the end of this year, I'm going to record my first comedy album, even though I could not even go to the grocery store. So, I ended up recording my first comedy album based on this. There was like a kind of a story in there, and it was about being diagnosed with this.
Well, and
And
I would go a step further because I got to see this show because
right,
you were recording it, and the
yep,
juxtaposition. So Vicky found this incredible way of formatting moments of comedy and breaking it up with really beautiful monologues about the actual
hmm
experience, and the dichotomy of
right.
it was incredible.
That was it was, and it was my director's idea, Brian Luna, who's a brilliant director and actor. I should say that. Oh, I lost my train of thought.
That happens, doesn't
um,
it?
yeah.
You cannot
Well,
blame it
anyway,
on anxiety. Maybe you can blame it on your occasional vape.
no, I'm not. I don't think I'm going to blame that one on anxiety. But no, and it was amazing because people responded like so well, and I was scared to do it. I thought, oh no, I'm going to be a laughing stock, or my problems are futile. There's like war going on with Israel and Palestine, and there's Syrian refugees, and Robin Williams just committed suicide. What are my problems? And my amazing partner, Max, husband, said that it is not futile, and he's a history buff, so he ended up quoting Winston Churchill, like, if we don't have money for the arts, what are we fighting for, or whatever. It was like I'm paraphrasing, but I'm so glad I did it because number one, I had like 5 sold out shows off Broadway, and number two, people would write me after and say, you made me feel like less alone,
Mm. And the power of
which
that
was incredible.
is so unbelievable. So for those of you who are interested in hearing more about Vicky's story, I would encourage you to go to MyCounterpane /mental health. Do a search on Vickey Kuperman. She has put a few points about her journey that you may find interesting. And in one of those posts, she is going to lay out her actual work, her website, so that you can check out
Yep.
some of the stuff she's done, this show, this comedy album, and some other stuff. What are you working on now, Vic?
Well, I just published a book this year. It's a political humor book about
Oh my
Russia
God,
and
you
our
can be
election.
funny in politics?
What?
You can be funny in politics right now?
Yeah, you have to be, or else what? How else do we cope?
Mhm.
And I'm performing all over. So you just go to my website. It's Vickey Kuperman, Kuperman.
It's awesome. You're amazing. It's always a pleasure
So are you.
to speak with you. And I feel like, even though, I mean, what's funny about you and me, first of all, Vicky is Russian. She's a brunette. She has a round face. I have an oval face. We're pretty different. And what's been really kind of cool, Vic, is that our paths, if you look at the milestones, right, you actually found someone to get married to. Good job. You actually had a moment of mortality. So did I.
Yeah.
We both continue to do what we know to be true creatively. And it's just awesome to have you be on the path and to introduce you guys to such an amazing person who's freaking funny.
Oh, thank you.
That's you.
My latest album, All Good, is also on iTunes and all that, and that is more about politics as well. What can I say? This last year, how can you not talk about politics?
I agree. I definitely get it. So, okay, that's it for now. Amazing people listening to Lean Into Lonely. If you guys have a moment that you want to share here, we'd love to hear about it, and we will talk to you next time. Let's hear you sign off, Vicky. How do you do it on stage? Go.
Thank you so much. Except you. You were terrible. Thank you. This was great.